before Lancelot and Guinevere, before Romeo and Juliet, before Lady and Tramp, Tristan and Isolde. A two-night special event tonight, part the first. One of the oldest love stories ever written is an epic tale of doomed love. The best kind, right? Yeah, we'll see. The daughter of Ireland's King Donnchadth falls into a forbidden love with the son of Cornwall's Lord Marke. The passion and love of Romeo and Juliet combined with the war and action thrillers of the Gladiator. Well, there it is. If you'd like to follow along with the reading tonight, it's in the blog entries, but it's also right here in local chat if you for some reason would like to read along, because it is Arthurian stuff. It's not Old English by any means, but it is structured a little bit different than what we're usually used to listening to. So, yes, February, the month of love. Tonight is part the first of the romance of Tristan and Isolde. Now, if you've been with us for a while, you may have heard this one before, as I presented it previously in 2011. But perhaps you'll enjoy it still anyway. My face in thine eye, thine and mine appears. In true plain hearts do in the faces rest. Where can we find two better hemispheres, without sharp north, without declining west? The childhood of Tristan. My lords, if you would hear a high tale of love and of death, here is that of Tristan and Queen Isolde. How to their full joy, but to their sorrow also, they loved each other, and how at last they died of that love together upon one day, she by him, and he by her. The end. Well, it's not as long as I thought it was going to be. Oh, wait, there's another page. Long ago, when Marke was king over Cornwall, Rivalen, king of Lyonesse, heard that Marke's enemies waged war on him. So he crossed the sea to bring him aid, and so faithfully did he serve with counsel and sword that Marke gave him his sister, Blanchefleur, who King Rivalen loved most marvellously. He wedded her in Tintagel, Minster, but hardly was she wed when the news came to him that his old enemy, Duke Morgan, had fallen on Lyonesse and was wasting town and field. Then Rivalen manned his ships in haste, and took Blanchefleur with him to his far land. But she was with child. He landed below his castle of Canel, and gave the queen in ward to his marshal Rohalt, and after that they set off to wage his war. Blanchefleur waited for him continually, but he did not come home, till she learnt upon a day that Duke Morgan had killed him in foul ambush. She did not weep, she made no cry or lamentation, but her limbs failed her and grew weak, and her soul was filled with a strong desire to be rid of the flesh. And though Rohalt tried to soothe her, she would not hear. 3 days she awaited reunion with her lord, and on the 4th she brought forth a son, and taking him in her arms, she said, "Little son, I have longed while to see you, and now I see you, the fairest thing ever a woman bore. In sadness came I hither, in sadness did I bring forth, and in sadness has your first feast day gone by. And as by sadness you came into the world, your name shall be Tristan, that is the child of sadness." And after she said these words, she kissed him, and immediately when she had kissed the little child, she died. Rohalt, the keeper of the faith, took the child, but already Duke Morgan's men besieged the castle of Canel all round about. Now there is a wise saying, "A fool hardy was never hardy," and he was compelled to yield to Duke Morgan at his mercy. But for fear that Morgan might slay Rivalen's heir, the marshal hid him among his own sons. And when the 7 years were past, and the time had come to take the child from the women, Rohalt put Tristan under a good master, the squire Gorvenal. And Gorvenal taught him in a few years the arts that go with barony. He taught him the use of lance and sword, and scutcheon and bow, and how to cast stone quoits, and to leap wide dikes also. And he taught him to hate every lie and felony, and to keep his given word, and he taught him the various kinds of song and harp playing and the hunter's craft. And when the child rode among the young squires, you would have said that he and his horse and his armor were all one thing. To see him so noble and so proud, broad in the shoulders, loyal, raw, strong, and right, all men glorified Rohalt in such a son. But Rohalt, remembering Rivalen and Blanchefleur, of whose youth and grace all this was a resurrection, loved him indeed as a son, but in his heart revered him as his lord. Now all this joy was snatched from him one day, when certain merchants of Norway, having lured Tristan to their ship, bore him off as a rich prize, though Tristan fought hard as a young wolf struggles caught in a gin. But it is a truth well proved, and every sailor knows it, that the sea will hardly bear a felon ship and give no aid to rapine. The sea rose and cast a dark storm round the ship and drove it 8 days and 8 nights at random, till the mariners caught through the mist a coast of awful cliffs and seaward rocks whereon the sea would have ground their hull to pieces. Then they did penance, knowing that the anger of the sea came of the lad whom they had stolen in an evil hour, and they vowed his deliverance and got ready a boat to put him, if might be, ashore. Then the wind and sea fell on the sky shone, and as the Norway ship grew small in the offing, a quiet tide cast Tristan and the boat upon a beach of sand. Hello, Attius, welcome indeed. Painfully Tristan climbed the cliff and saw beyond a lonely rolling heath and a forest stretching out in the endless. And he wept, remembering Gorvenal, his father, in the land of Lyonesse. And then the distant cry of a hunt with horse and hound came suddenly and lifted his heart, and a tall stag broke cover at the forest edge. The pack and the hunt streamed after it with a tumult of cries and winding horns. But just as the hounds were racing clustered at the haunch, the quarry turned to bay at a stone's throw from Tristan. A huntsman gave him the thrust, and while all around the hunt had gathered and was winding the kill. But Tristan, seeing by the gesture of the huntsman that he made to cut the neck of the stag, cried out, "My lord, what would you do? Is it fitting to cut up so noble a beast like any farmyard hog? Is that the custom of this country?" And the huntsman answered, "Fair friend, what startles you? This is as we have done since the first huntsmen have done with the Cornish men. If however you know some nobler custom, teach it us. Take this knife, and we will learn it willingly." Then Tristan kneeled and proceeded, and the huntsman and the kennel hind stood over him with delight, and the master huntsman said, "Friend, these are good ways. In what land learnt you them? Tell us your country, your name." "Good lord, my name is Tristan, and I learnt these ways in my country of Lyonesse." "Tristan," said the master huntsman, "God reward the father that brought you up so nobly. Doubtless he is a baron, rich and strong." Now Tristan knew both speech and silence, and he answered, "No, lord. My father is a burgess. I left his home unbeknownst upon a ship that trafficked to a far place, for I wished to learn how men lived in foreign lands. But if you'll accept me of the hunt, I will follow you gladly and teach you other crafts of venery." "Why, fair Tristan, I marvel there should be a land where a burgess's son can know what a knight's son knows not elsewhere. But come with us, since you will it, and welcome. We will bring you to King Marke, our lord." So Tristan completed his task. To the dogs he gave the heart, the head, the offal, and the ears, and he taught the hunt how the skinning and the ordering should be done. Then he thrust the pieces upon pikes and gave them to his huntsman to carry. And so they took to the road and spoke together, till they came upon a great castle, and round it fields and orchards and living waters and fish ponds and ploughlands, and many ships were in its haven, for that castle stood above the sea. It was well fenced against all assault and engines of war, and its keep, which the giants had built long ago, was compact of great stones, like a chessboard of vert and azure. And when Tristan asked its name, "Good liege, we call it Tintagel," and Tristan cried, "Tintagel, blessed be thou of God, and blessed be they that dwell there within." Therein, my lords, therein had Rivlin taken Blanchefleur to wife, and though their son knew it not. When they came before the keep, the horns brought the barons to the gates, and King Mark himself. And when the master huntsman had told him all the story, and King Mark had marveled at the good order of the cavalcade, and the cutting of the stag, and the high art of venery and all, yet most he wondered at the stranger boy, and still gazed at him, troubled, and wondering whence came his tenderness. His heart would answer him nothing. But, my lords, it was blood that spoke, and the love he had long since borne his sister Blanchefleur. So that evening, when the boards were cleared, a singer out of Wales, a master, came forward among the barons in the hall and sang a harper's song. And as this harper touched the strings of his harp, Tristan, who sat at the king's feet, spoke thus to him: "O master, that is the first of songs. The Bretons of old wove it once to chant the loves of Grelin, and the melody is rare, and rare are the words. Master, your voice is subtle, harpest that well." But when the Welshman had sung, he answered, Boy, what do you know of the craft of music? If the burgess of Lyonesse teach their sons harp, play also, and rotes and viols too, and take this harp and show us your skill. Hello, Albus, Crystal, Asnana. Welcome, welcome. Um, if you care to read along with the story, there's a link to the full text. And then Tristan took the harp and sang so well the barons softened as they heard. And King Mark marveled at the harp. Harper from Lyonesse, whither so long ago Rivalen had taken Blanchefleur away. And when the song ended, the king was silent a long space, but he said at last, Son, blessed be the masters that taught thee, and blessed be thou of God, for God loves a good singer. Their voices and the voice of the harp enter the souls of men and wake dear memories and cause them to forget many a mourning and many a sin. For our joy did you come to this roof. Stay near us a long time, my friend. And Tristan answered, Very willingly will I serve you, sire, as your harper, your huntsman, and your liege. And so did he. And for 3 years a mutual love grew up in their hearts. By day Tristan followed King Mark at pleas and in saddle. By night he slept in the royal room with the councillors and the peers, and if the king was sad he would harp to him and soothe his care. The barons also cherished him, and, as you shall learn, Dinas of Lidan, the seneschal, beyond all others. And more tenderly than the barons and the Dinas the king loved him, but Tristan could not forget, or Rohalt his father, or his master Cornwall, or the land of Lyonesse, from whence he had come. My lords, a teller that would please should not stretch his tale too long, and truly this tale is so various and so high that it needs no straining. Then let me shortly tell how Rohalt himself, after long wandering by sea and land, came into Cornwall and found Tristan, and showing the king the carbuncle that was once Blanchefleur's, said, King Mark, here is your nephew Tristan, son of your sister Blanchefleur and king of Rivalen. Duke Morgan holds his land most wrongfully. It is time such land came back to its lord. And Tristan, in a word, when his uncle had armed him knight, crossed the sea and was hailed of his father's vassals, and killed Rivalen's slayer, and was reseized of his land. And then, remembering how King Mark could no longer live in joy without him, he summoned his council and his barons, and said this, Lords of Lyonesse, I, Tristan, have retaken this place, and I have avenged King Rivalen by the help of God and of you. But 2 men, Rohalt and King Mark of Cornwall, nourished me, an orphan and a wandering boy, and so I should call them also fathers. Now a free man has 2 things thoroughly his own, his body and his land. To Rohalt, then, here I will release my land. Do you hold it, father, and your son shall hold it after you. But my body I give up to King Mark. I will leave this country, dear though it be to me, and in Cornwall I will serve King Mark as my lord. Such is my judgment, but you, my lords of Lyonesse, are my lieges, and owe me counsel. If then some one of you will counsel me another thing, let him rise and speak. But all the barons praised him, and though they wept in taking him with Cornwall only, Tristan set sail back to King Mark's land. The Morholt out of Ireland. Now when Tristan came back to the land, King Mark and all his barony were mourning, for the king of Ireland had manned a fleet to ravage Cornwall. Should King Mark refuse, as he had refused these 15 years, to pay tribute his fathers had paid. Now that year this king had sent to Tintagel to carry his summons a giant knight, the Morholt, whose sister he had wed, and whom no man had yet been able to overcome. So King Mark had summoned all the barons of his land to council by letter sealed. On the day they assigned, when the barons were gathered in hall, and when the king had taken his throne, the Morholt said these things. King Mark, hear for the last time the summons of the King of Ireland, my lord. He arraigns you to pay at last that which you have owed so long, and because you have refused it too long already, he bids you give over to me this day 300 youths and 300 maidens drawn by lot from among the Cornish folk. But if so be that any would prove by trial of combat that the King of Ireland receives his tribute without right, I will take up that wager. Which among you, my Cornish lords, will fight me to redeem this land? The barons glanced at each other, but all were silent. But then Tristan knelt at the feet of King Mark and said, Lord King, by your leave, I will do that battle. And in vain would King Mark have turned him from his purpose, thinking, how could even valor serve so young a knight? But he threw down his gage to the Morholt, and the Morholt took up the gage. And on the appointed day he had himself clad for a great feat of arms and a hauberk and a steel helm, and he entered a boat, and he drew to the islet of St. Sampson's, where the knights were to fight each other, each to each alone. Now the Morholt had hoisted his mast sail of rich purple, and coming fast to land, he moored his boat on the shore. But Tristan pushed off his own boat adrift with his feet, and said, "One of us only will go hence alive. One boat will serve." And each rousing the other to the fray, they passed into the isle. Now no man saw that sharp combat, but thrice the salt sea breeze had wafted, or seemed to waft, a cry of fury to the land. And when at last, towards the hour of noon, the purple sail showed far off, the Irish boat appeared from the island shore, and there rose a clamour of "The Morholt!" When suddenly, as the boat grew larger on the sight and topped a wave, they saw that Tristan stood on the prow of that boat, holding a sword in his hand. He leapt ashore, and as the mothers kissed the steel upon his feet, he cried to the Morholt's men, "My lords of Ireland, the Morholt fought well. See, my sword is broken, and a splinter of it stands fast in his head still. Take you that steel, my lords, it is the tribute of Cornwall, and all you will get." Then he went up to Tintagel, and even as he went, the people he had freed and waved green boughs and rich cloths were hung at the windows. But when Tristan reached the castle with joy and songs and joy bells sounding him, he drooped suddenly in the arms of King Mark, for the blood ran from his wounds. The Morholt's men, when they landed in Ireland, quite cast down, for whenever he came back into Whitehaven, the Morholt had been wont to take joy in the sight of his clan upon the shore, of the queen of his sister, and of his niece Isolde the fair. Tenderly had they cherished him of old, and had he taken some wound, they healed him, for they were skilled in balms and potions. But now their magic was vain, for the Morholt lay dead, and the splinter of the foreign brand yet stood in his skull till Isolde plucked it out and shut it in the chest. And from that day on, Isolde the fair knew and hated the name of Tristan of Lyonesse. But over in Tintagel, Tristan languished, for there trickled a poisonous blood from his wounds. The doctors found that the Morholt had thrust into him a poisoned barb, and as their potions and their theriac could never heal him, they left him in God's hands. And so hateful a stench came from Tristan's wounds that all his dearest friends fled him, all save King Mark, Gorvenal, and Dinas and Lydon. They always could stay near his couch because their love overcame their abhorrence. At last Tristan had himself carried into a boat apart from the shore, and lying facing the sea, he awaited death, for he thought, if I must die, and I must, but it is a good to see the sun, and my heart is still high. I would like to try the sea that brings all chances. I would have the sea bear me far off alone, to what land no matter, so that it may heal me of my wound. And so Tristan begged so long that King Mark accepted his desire. He bore him into a boat with neither sail nor oar, and Tristan wished that his harp only should be placed beside him, for sails he could not lift, nor oar ply, nor swords wield. And as a seaman on some long voyage cast to the sea of a loved companion dead, so Gorvenal pushed out to sea that boat where his dear son lay, and the sea drew him away. For 7 days and 7 nights the sea drew him on. At times Tristan's grief he harped, and when at last the sea brought him near a shore where fishermen had left their port that night to fish far out, they heard as they rowed a sweet song and a living tune that ran above the sea, and feathering their oars they listened immovable. In the first whiteness of the dawn they saw the boat at large, and she went at random, and nothing seemed to live in her except the voice of the harp. But as they neared that little boat, the air grew weaker and died, and when they hailed her, Tristan's hand had fallen lifeless on the strings, though they still trembled. The fishermen took him in, and bore him back to port to their lady, who was merciful and perhaps would heal him. Now it was that same port of Whitehaven where Morholt lay, and their lady was Isolde the fair. Now she alone, being skilled in philters, potions, could save Tristan, but she alone wished him dead. When Tristan knew himself again, for her art restored him, he knew himself to be in the land of peril, But he was yet strong to hold his own, and found good crafty words. Tristan told a tale of how he was a seer that had taken passage on a merchant ship and sailed to Spain to learn the art of reading all the stars. Tristan told of how pirates had boarded his ship and of how, though wounded, he had fled into that boat. Tristan was believed, nor did any of the Morholt's men know his face again, so hardly the poison had used it. But when after 40 days the salt of the golden hair had all but healed Tristan, when already his limbs had recovered and the grace of youth returned, he knew that he must escape, and he fled after many dangers. He came again before Mark the king. Quest of the Lady with the Hair of Gold. Now, my lords and ladies, there were in the court of King Mark 4 barons of the basest men who hated Tristan with a hard hate, for his greatness and for the tender love the king bore him. Now well I know their names, Andret, Gwendolen, Gondoin, and Denolan. They knew that the king had intent to grow old childless to leave his land to Tristan, and their envy swelled, and by lies they angered the chief men of Cornwall against Tristan. They said, "There have been too many marvels in this man's life. It was marvel enough that he beat the Morholt, but by what sorcery did he try the sea alone at the point of his death? Of which of us, my lords, could voyage without master sail? They say that warlocks can. It was a warlock feat, and then as a warlock harp of his pours poison daily into the King Mark's heart. See how Tristan has bent that heart by power and chain of sorcery. Tristan will be king yet, my lords, and you will hold your lands of a wizard." I brought over the greater part of the barons, and these pressed King Mark to take to wife some king's daughter who should give him an heir, or else they threatened to return each man into his keep and wage him war. But the king turned against them and swore in his heart that so long as his dear nephew lived, no king's daughter should come to his bed. Then in his turn did Tristan, in his shame to be thought to serve for hire, threaten that if the king did not yield to his barons, that Tristan himself would go over the sea and serve some great king. At this, King Mark made a term with his barons and gave them 40 days to hear his decision. On that appointed 40th day, King Mark awaited alone in his chamber and sadly mused, "Where shall I find a king's daughter so fair, yet so distant that I may feign to wish her my wife?" Just then, by his window that looked upon the sea, 2 building swallows came in quarreling together. And then startled they flew out, but those 2 birds had left fall from their beaks a woman's hair, long and fine, and shining like a beam of light. King Mark took it, and called his barons and Tristan, and said, "To please you, lords, I will take a wife, but you must seek her whom I have chosen." "Fair lord, we wish it all, and who may she be?" they said. "Why," said King Mark, "she whose hair this is, nor will I take another." "And whence, Lord King, comes this hair of gold? Who brought it from, and what land?" "It comes, my lords, from the lady with the hair of gold. The swallows brought it to me. They know what country it came from." Then the barons saw themselves mocked and cheated, and they turned with sneers to Tristan, for they thought him to have counselled the trick. But Tristan, when he had looked on the hair of gold, remembered Isolde the fair, and smiled, and said, "King Mark, my beloved uncle, can you not see that the doubts of these lords shame me? You have designed in vain. I will go seek the lady with the hair of gold. The search is perilous, nevertheless, my uncle. I would once more put my body and my life into peril for you, that your barons may know I love you loyally. I take this oath, to die on the adventure to bring back to this castle of Tintagel the queen with that fair hair." And so Tristan fitted out a great ship, and loaded it with corn and wine and honey and all manner of good things. He manned it with Gorvenal and 100 young knights of high birth, chosen among the bravest, and he clothed them in coats of homespun and hair and cloth that they seemed merchants only. But under the deck he had rich cloth of gold and scarlet and many wheels of yummy cheese, as for a great king's messengers. And when the ship had taken the sea, the helmsman asked him, "Lord, to what land shall I steer?" "Sir," said Tristan, "steer for Ireland, straight for Whitehaven harbor." At first Tristan made to believe to the men of Whitehaven that his friends were merchants of England come peacefully to barter. But as these strange merchants passed the day in the useless games of draughts and chess, and seemed to know dice better than the bargain price of corn, Tristan feared discovery and knew not how to pursue his quest. Now it chanced once upon the break of day that he heard a cry so terrible that one would have called it a demon's cry. Nor had he ever heard a brute bellow in such wise, so awful and strange it seemed. He called a woman who passed by the harbour, and said, "Tell me, lady, whence comes that voice I have heard, and hide me nothing." "My lord," says she, "I will tell you truly. It is the roar of a dragon, the most terrible and dauntless dragon upon this earth. Daily that dragon leaves its dens and stands at one of the gates of the city, nor can any come out or go in till a maiden has been given up to that dragon, and when it has her in its claws, it devours her." "Lady," said Tristan, "make no mock of me, but tell me straight, can a man born of woman kill this thing?" "Ah, fair sir and gentle," she answered, "I cannot say, but this is sure, 20 knights have and tried have run the venture, because the King of Ireland has published it that he will give his daughter Isolde the Fair to whomsoever shall kill the beast, but it has devoured all score of those knights." And so Tristan left the woman, returning to his ship, armed himself in secret. It was a fine sight to see so noble a charger and so good a knight come out from a merchant hull. But the haven was empty for folk, and for the dawn had barely broken, and none saw him as he rode to the gate. And hardly had he passed it when he met suddenly 5 men at full gallop flying toward the town. Tristan seized one by his hair as he passed, and dragged him over to his mount's crupper and held him fast. "God save you, my lord," said he, "and whence does the dragon come?" When the others had shown him by what road, he let them go. Now as that monster neared, he showed the head of a bear, and red eyes like coals of fire, and hairy tufted ears, lion's claws, and a serpent's tail, and a griffin's body. Tristan charged his horse at him so strongly that though the beast's mane stood with fright, yet he drove at that dragon. His lance struck its scales and shivered. And then Tristan drew his sword and struck at the dragon's head, but he did not do so much as cut the hide. The beast felt the blow, and with its claws he dragged at the shield and broke it from the arm. And then, his breast unshielded, Tristan used the sword again and struck so strongly that the air rang all about him, but in vain, for he could not wound. And meanwhile the dragon vomited from his nostrils 2 streams of loathsome flames, and Tristan's helm blackened like a cinder, and his horse stumbled and fell down and died. But Tristan, standing on his feet, thrust his sword right into the beast's jaws and split its heart in 2. And then Tristan cut out the tongue and put it into his hose inside his shirt. But as the poison came against his flesh, the hero fainted and fell in the high grass that bordered the marsh ground. Now the man he had stopped in flight was a seneschal of Ireland, and he desired the Isolde fair. I mean, who wouldn't? And though he was a coward, he had dared so far as to return with his companions secretly, and he found the dragon dead. So he cut off its head, he bore it to the king, and claimed the great reward for himself. Now the king could credit his prowess but hardly, yet wished justice done, and summoned his vassals to court, so that there, before the barony assembled, the seneschal should furnish proof of his victory won. When Isolde the Fair heard that she was be given to this coward, first she laughed long, and then she wailed. But on the morrow, doubting some trick, she took with her Pyramus, her squire, and Brangian, her maid, and all 3 rode unbeknownst toward the dragon's lair. And Isolde saw such a trail on the road as made her wonder, for the hooves that made it had never been shod in her land. And then she came on the dragon, headless, and a dead horse beside him, nor was the horse harnessed in the fashion of Ireland. And some foreign man had slain this beast, but they knew not whether he still lived or no. They sought him long, Isolde and Pyramus and Brangian together, until at last Brangian saw the helm glittering in the marshy grass, and Tristan still breathed. Pyramus put him on his horse and bore him secretly to the women's rooms. There Isolde told her mother the tale, and left the hero with her, and as the queen unharnessed him, the dragon's tongue fell from his boot of steel. Then the Queen of Ireland revived him by virtue of an herb, and said, "Stranger, I know you for the true slayer of the dragon, but our seneschal, a felon, cut off its head, and claims my daughter Isolde for his wages. Will you be ready 2 days hence to give him the lie in battle?" "Queen," said he, "the time is short, but you, I think, can cure me in 2 days, no? Upon the dragon I conquered Isolde, and on the seneschal perhaps I shall reconquer her." Then the queen brewed him strong brews, and on the morrow Isolde the Fair got him ready a bath, and anointed him with a balm her mother had conjured. And as he looked at her, he thought, "So I have found the queen of the hair of gold." And he smiled as he thought it. But Isolde, noting it, thought, "Why does he smile? Or what have I neglected of the things due to a guest? He smiles to think that I have forgotten to burnish his armor." So she went down and drew the sword from its rich sheath. But when she saw the splinter gone, and the gap in the edge of the sword, she thought of Morholt's head. Isolde balanced a moment in doubt, and she went to where she kept the steel she had found in the skull. She put it to the sword. It fitted so the joint was hardly seen. Then Isolde ran to where Tristan lay wounded, and with the sword above him she cried, "You are Tristan of Lyonesse, who killed the Morholt, my mother's brother, my uncle, and now you shall die in your turn, villain." Tristan strained to ward the blow, but he was too weak. His wit, however, stood firm in spite of evil, and he said, "So be it. Let me die. But to save yourself long memories, listen a while. King's daughter, my life is not only in your power, but is yours of right. My life is yours because you have twice returned it to me. Once long ago, for I was the wounded harper whom you healed of the poison of the Morholt's shaft. Nor repent of that healing, were not these wounds had in fair fight. Did I kill the Morholt by treason? No. Had he not defied me, and was I not held to the defense of my own body? And now this second time also you have saved me. It was for you I fought that dragon beast. But leave these things. I would but show you how my life is your own. Then if you kill me of the right, for the glory of it, you may ponder for long years, praising yourself that you killed a wounded guest who had wagered his life in your gaining." Isolde replied, "I hear strange words. Why should he that killed the Morholt seek me also his niece? Doubtless because the Morholt came for a tribute of maidens from Cornwall, so you came to boast, returning that you had brought back the maiden who's nearest to him to Cornwall a slave." "King's daughter," said Tristan, "no. One day 2 swallows flew to Tintagel and bore 1 hair out of all your hairs of gold, and I thought they brought me goodwill and peace, so I came to find you overseas. See here, mid the threads of gold upon my coat, your hair is sewn. See, the threads are tarnished, but your bright hair still shines." Isolde put down the sword, and taking up the coat of arms, she saw upon it the hair of gold, and was silent a long space, till she kissed Tristan on the lips to prove peace, and she put rich garments over him. On the day of the barons' assembly, Tristan sent Pyramus privily to his ship to summon his companions, that they should come over to the court, adorned as befit the envoys of great king. And so one by one the 100 knights passed into the hall where all the barons of Ireland stood. They entered in silence. They sat all ranked together. On their scarlet and purple gems gleamed. When the king had taken his throne, the seneschal arose to prove by witness and by arms that he had slain the dragon, and that so Isolde was won. And then Isolde bowed to her father and said, "My king, I have here a man who challenges your seneschal for lies and felony. Promise that you will pardon this man all his past deeds, who stands to prove that he and none other slew that dragon, and grant him forgiveness and your peace." The king said, "I grant it." But Isolde said, "Father, first give me the kiss of peace and forgiveness, a sign that you will give him the same." Then she found Tristan and led him before the barony. And as he came, the 100 knights rose all together, and crossed their arms upon their breasts, and bowed, so the Irish knew that he was their lord. But among the Irish many knew him again, and cried, "Tristan of Lyonesse, that slew the Morholt!" They drew their swords and clamored for death. But Isolde cried, "King, kiss this man, as your oath was." And the king kissed him, and the clamor fell. Then Tristan showed the dragon's tongue, and offered the seneschal battle, but the seneschal looked at his face and dared not. Coward. Then Tristan said, "My lords, you have said it, and it is truth. I killed your Morholt, but I crossed the sea to offer you a good blood fine, to ransom that deed and get me quit of it. I put my body in peril of death, and rid you of the beast, and have so conquered Isolde the Fair, and having conquered her, I will bear her away on my ship. But these lands of Cornwall and Ireland may know no more hatred, but love only. Learn that King Mark, my lord, will marry her. Here stand 100 knights of high name, who all will swear with an oath upon the relics of the holy saints that King Mark sends you by their embassy offer of peace and of brotherhood and goodwill, and that he would by your courtesy hold Isolde as his honoured wife, and that he would have all the men of Cornwall serve her as their queen. When the lords of Ireland heard this, they acclaimed it, and the king also was content. And then, since the treaty and alliance was to be made, the king her father took Isolde by the hand and asked of Tristan that he should take an oath, to wit that he would lead her loyally to his lord. And Tristan took that oath and swore it before the knights and the barony of Ireland assembled. And then the king put Isolde's right hand into Tristan's right hand, and Tristan held it for a space in a token of seizing the king of Cornwall. And so, for the love of King Mark, did Tristan conquer the queen of the hair of gold. The philtre, which is the potion. They called it filter then, but the potion. You play Doom and World of Warcraft and stuff, you probably already know that. Anyway, the philtre. When the day of Isolde's delivery to the lords of Cornwall drew near, her mother gathered herbs and flowers and roots and steeped them in wine and brewed a potion of might, and if having done so, set apart to Brangin. Child, it is yours to go with Isolde to King Mark's country, for you love her with a faithful love. Take then this pitcher, and remember well my words. Hide it so that no eye shall see, nor lip go near it. But when the wedding night has come, and that moment in which the wedded are left alone, you are to pour this essence wine into a cup and offer it to King Mark and to Isolde his new queen. Oh, take all care, my child, that they alone shall taste this brew, for this is its power. They who drink of it together love each other with their every single sense, with their every thought, forever in life and in death. And as Brangin promised the queen that she would do her bidding. Now on the boat that bore her to Dintigal, Isolde the Fair was weeping as she remembered her own land, and mourning swelled her heart. She said, Who am I that I should leave you to follow unknown men, my mother and my land? Accursed be the sea that bears me, for rather would I lie dead on the earth where I was born than live out there beyond. But one day when the wind had fallen and the sails hung slack, Tristan dropped anchor by an island, and 100 knights of Cornwall and the sailors, weary of the sea, landed all. Isolde alone remained aboard, and a little serving maid, when Tristan came near the queen to calm her sorrow. The sun was hot above them, and they were athirst. And as they called, the little maid looked about for drink, and found them the pitcher that the mother of Isolde had given to Brangin's keeping. And when she came on it, the child cried, I have found wine. But she had not found wine. She had found passion and joy most sharp, and anguish without end, and death. And so Queen Isolde drank deep of that draught, and gave it to Tristan. He drank also long, and emptied it all. And Brangin came in upon them. She saw them gazing at each other in silence, as though ravished and apart. She saw before them the pitcher standing there. She snatched it up and cast it into the shuddering sea, and cried aloud, Cursed be the day I was born! Cursed the day that I first trod this deck! Isolde, my friend, and Tristan, you have drunk death together. And once more the boat ran free for Tintagel. But it seemed to Tristan as though an ardent briar, a sharp thorn, but with flower most sweet-smelling, drove roots into his blood, and laced the lovely body of Isolde all round about it, and bound it to his own, and to his every thought and desire. And he thought, Felons that charge him with coveting King Mark's land, I have come lower by far, for it is not his land that I covet. Fair uncle, who loved me orphaned ere ever you knew me in the blood of your sister Blanchefleur, you that wept as you bore me to that boat alone, why did you not drive out the boy that was to betray you? Ah, what thought was that? Isolde is yours. I am but your vassal. Isolde is yours. I am your son. Isolde is yours, and may not love me. Yes, but Isolde did love him, though she would have hated. She could not hate, for tenderness more sharp than hatred tore her. And Brangin watched them both in anguish, suffering more cruelly because she alone knew the depths of evil done. 2 days Brangin watched them, seeing them refuse all food or comfort, and seeking each other as blind men seek, wretched apart, and together more wretched still, for then they trembled, each for the first avowal. On the 3rd day, as Tristan neared the tent on deck where Isolde sat. She saw him coming, and she said to him very humbly, "Come in, my lord." "Queen," said Tristan, "why do you call me lord? Am I not your liege and vassal to revere and serve and cherish you as my lady and queen?" But Isolde answered, "No. You know that you are my lord and my master, and I am your slave. Ah, why did I not sharpen those wounds of the wounded singer, let die that dragon slayer in the grasses of the marsh? But then I did not know what I know now." "And what is that, Isolde, that you know?" And Isolde laid her arm upon Tristan's shoulder. The light of her eyes was drowned, her lips trembled. "Now I know the love of you, my Tristan." Whereat he put his lips to hers. But as they tasted their first joy, Brangien, that watched them, stretched her arms and cried at their feet in tears, "Stay and return if still you can, but oh, that path has no returning, for already love and his strength drag you on, and now henceforth forever never shall you know joy without pain again, the both of you. The wine possesses you, the draught your mother gave me, the draught the king alone should have drunk with you, Isolde. But that old enemy has tricked us, all us three, friend Tristan, Isolde, my friend, for that bad ward I kept take here my body and my life, for through me and in that cup you have drunk not love alone, but love and death together." The lovers held each other. Life and desire trembled through their youth, and Tristan said, "Well then, come death." And as evening fell upon the little boat, they heeled and ran to King Mark's land. They gave themselves up utterly to love. Oh, we know what that means, don't we? That's where the screen gets all wavy and stuff. You can't see what they're doing. The tall pine tree. As King Mark came down to greet Isolde upon the shore, Tristan took her hand and led her to the king, and the king took seizin of her, taking her hand. He led her in great pomp to his castle of Tintagel, and as she came in hall amid the vassals, her beauty shone so that the walls were lit as they were lit at dawn. Then King Mark blessed those swallows which by happy courtesy had brought the hair of gold, and Tristan also he blessed, and the 100 knights also he blessed on that adventurous boat had gone to find him the joy of heart and of eyes, and yet to him also that ship was to bring sting and torment and mourning. And on the 18th day, having called his barony together, King Mark took Isolde to wife. But on the wedding night, to save her friend, Brangien took her place in the darkness, for her remorse demanded even this from her, nor was the trick discovered. Then Isolde lived as a queen, but lived in sadness. She had King Mark's tenderness and the baron's honor. The people also loved her. She passed her days amid the frescoes on the walls and the floors, all strewn with flowers. Good jewels had she, and purple cloth and tapestry of Hungary and Thessaly too, and songs of harpers and curtains upon which were worked leopards and eagles and popinjays and all the beasts of the sea and field. And her love too she had, love high and splendid, for as is the custom among great lords, Tristan could ever be near her, at his leisure and at his dalliance, night and day, for he slept in the king's chamber, as great lords do, among the lieges and the councillors. Yet still Isolde feared, for though her love were secret and Tristan unsuspected, who suspects their own son, Brangien knew. And Brangien seemed in the queen's mind like a witness spying, for Brangien alone knew what manner of life she led, and held her at her mercy so. And the queen thought, if some day she should be weary of serving as a slave the bed where once she passed for queen, if Tristan should die from her betrayal. So fear maddened the queen, but not in truth the fear of Brangien, who was loyal. Her own heart bred the fear. Not Brangien, who was faithful, not Brangien, but themselves had these lovers to fear, for hearts so stricken will lose their vigilance. Love pressed them hard, as thirst presses the dying stag to the stream. Love dropped upon them from high heaven, as a hawk slips after a long hunger falls right upon the bird. And love will not be hidden. Brangien indeed by her prudence saved them well, nor ever were the queen and her lover unguarded, but in every hour and place where every man could see love terrible that rode them, and could see in these lovers their every sense overflowing like new wine working in the vat. The 4 felons at court previously mentioned, who had hated Tristan of old for his prowess, watched the queen. They guessed that great love, and they burnt with envy and hatred and now a kind of evil joy. They planned to give news of their watching to the king, to see his tenderness turn to fury, trust Tristan thrust out or slain, and the queen in torment. For though they feared Tristan, their hated hatred mastered their fear. And on a day the 4 barons called King Mark to parley, and Andret said, "Fair king, your heart will be troubled, and we 4 also mourn. But yet we are bound to tell you what we know. You have placed your trust in Tristan, and Tristan would shame you. In vain we warn you, for the love of one man may have mocked ties of blood in all your barony. Learn then that this Tristan loves the queen. It is truth proved, and many a word is passing on it now, O king." The royal king shrank and answered, "Coward, what thought was that? Indeed, I have placed my trust in Tristan, and rightly, for on the day when the Morhold offered combat to you all, you hung your heads and were dumb, and you trembled before him. But Tristan dared him for the honor of this land and took mortal wounds. Therefore do you hate him, and therefore do I cherish him beyond thee, and Rhett, and beyond any other. But then have you seen, what have you seen or heard or know?" "Oh, naught, lord, naught, save what your own eyes could see or your ears hear. Look you and listen, sire, if there is yet time." And they left Lord Mark to taste the poison. Then King Mark watched the queen and Tristan. But Brangien, noting it, warned them both, and King watched in vain, so that soon, wearying of an ignoble task, but knowing, alas, that he could not kill his uneasy thought, he sent for Tristan and said, "Tristan, my son, leave this castle, and having left it, remain apart, and do not think to return to it, and do not repass its moats or boundaries. Felons have charged you with an awful treason, but ask me nothing. I could not speak their words without shame to us both. For your part, seek you no word to appease. I have not believed them, had I done so. But their evil words have troubled all my soul, and only by your absence can my disquiet be soothed. Go, doubtless I will soon recall you. Go, my son, you're still dear to me." So when the felons heard the news, they said among themselves, "That Tristan is gone, the wizard. He is driven out. Surely he will cross the sea on far adventures to carry his traitor's services to some other distant king." But Tristan had not the strength to depart altogether. When he had crossed the moats and the boundaries of the castle, he knew he could go no further. He stayed in Tintagel town and lodged with Gorvenal in the Burgess's house. And languished, more wounded than when in that day passed from the shaft of the Morhold had tainted his body. In the close towers Isolde the fair drooped also, but more wretched still, for it was hers all day long to feign laughter, and all night long to conquer fever and despair. All night as she lay by King Mark's side, fever still kept her waking, and she stared at darkness. She longed to fly to Tristan, and she dreamt dreams of running to the gates and of finding their sharp scythes, traps of felons, and cut her tender knees, and she dreamt of weakness and falling, and her wounds had left her blood upon the ground. And now these 2 lovers would have died, but Brangien succored them. At peril of her life, she found the house where Tristan lay. There Gorvenal opened to her very gladly, knowing what salvation she could bring. And so she found Tristan, and to save the lovers she taught him a device, nor was ever known a more subtle ruse of love. Now behind the castle of Tintagel, as behind me here in Kitely, was an orchard fenced around and wide, and all closed in with stout and pointed stakes, and numberless trees were there, and fruit on them, birds and clusters of sweet grapes, and furthest from the castle by the stakes of the palisade was a tall pine tree, straight and with heavy branches spreading from its trunk. And at its root a living spring welled calm into a marble round, and then ran between 2 borders, winding throughout the orchard, and so on, till it flowed at last within the castle and through the women's rooms. And every evening, by Brangien's counsel, Tristan cut him twigs and bark. He leapt the sharp stakes, and having come beneath the pine, he threw them into the clear spring, and they floated light as foam down the stream to the women's rooms. And Isolde watched for their coming. And in those evenings when she saw those twigs floating in the water, she would wander out into the orchard and find her friend. Lithe and in fear would she come, watching at every step for what might lurk in the trees, observing foes or felons whom she knew, till she spied Tristan, and the night and the branches of the pine protected them. And so on one of many nights, such, she said, "O Tristan, I have heard the castle is fairy, and that twice a year it vanishes away. So has it vanished now, and that this is an enchanted orchard of which the harpers sing." And as she said it, the sentinels bugled dawn. Isolde had refound her joy in Tristan's embraces. Mark's thought of ill ease grew faint, but the felons felt or knew which way lay truth, and they guessed that Tristan had met the queen. Till at last Duke Donnchadth said to his peers, "My lords, let's take counsel of Frocian, the dwarf, for he knows the 7 arts, and the magic of every kind of charm. He will teach us, if he will, the wiles of Isolde the fair." And so Frocian, the dwarf, the little evil man, drew signs for them and characters of sorcery, and he cast the fortunes of the hour, and then at last said, "Sirs, high good lords, this night shall seize them both you will." Then they led the little wizard to the king, and he said, "Sire, bid your huntsmen leash the hounds and saddle the horses, proclaim a 7 days' hunt in the forest and 7 nights abroad therein, and hang me high if you do not hear this night what converse Tristan holds." And so did the king unwillingly, and at fall of night he left the hunt, taking the dwarf in pillion, and entered the orchard. And the dwarf took him to the tall pine tree, saying, "Fair king, climb into these branches and take with you your arrows and your bow, for you may need them, and bide you still." That night the moon shone clear. Hid in the branches, the king saw his nephew leap the palisades and throw his bark and his twigs into the stream. But Tristan had bent over the round well to throw them, and so doing he had seen the image of the king in the branches above him. Now Tristan could not stop the bark and the twigs and the branches as they floated away, and there yonder in the women's rooms Isolde was watching and would come. And she came, and Tristan watched her motionless. Above him in the tree he heard the click of the arrow when it fits the string. Isolde came, but with more prudence than her wont, thinking, "What has passed that Tristan does not come to meet me? He has seen some foe." And suddenly by the clear moonshine, Isolde also saw the king's shadow in the font, and she showed the wit of women well. She did not lift her eyes. "Lord God," she said, low down, "grant that I may be the first to speak." "Tristan," Isolde said, "what have you dared to do, calling me hither at such an hour? Often have you called me to beseech you, said, and the queen though I am, I know you won me that title, and I have come. What would you with me?" "Queen, I would have you pray the king for me." She was in tears and trembling, but Tristan praised God the Lord, who had shown his friend her peril. "Queen," Tristan went on, "often and in vain have I summoned you. Never would you come. Take pity. The king hates me, I know not why. Perhaps you know the cause and can charm his anger, for whom can he trust if not you, chaste queen and courteous Isolde? Truly, Lord Tristan, you do not know that he doubts us both, and I, to add to my shame, must acquaint you of it. Oh, but God knows if I lie, never went out my love to any man, but he that first I received within me. And would you have me at such a time implore your pardon of the king? Why did he know of my passage here tonight he would cast my ashes to the wind? My body trembles, and I am afraid. I go, for I have waited too long." In the branches the king smiled and had pity. And as Isolde fled, "Queen," said Tristan, "in the Lord's name help me for charity." "Friend, God aid you," she replied. "The king wrongs you, but the Lord God will be by you in whatever land you go." And so Isolde went back to the women's room and told it to Brangien, who cried, "Isolde, God has worked a miracle for you. He is compassionate and will not hurt the innocent in heart, such as you and Tristan are." When he had left the orchard, the king said, smiling, "Fair nephew, that ride you planned is over now." But in an open glade apart, Frocian, the dwarf, read in the clear stars the king now meant his death. He blackened with shame and fear and fled into Wales. A neat little turn of phrase she used there, wasn't it? Anyway, the discovery. King Mark made peace with Tristan. Tristan returned to the castle as of old. Tristan slept in the king's chamber with his peers. He could come or go, the king thought no more of it. Mark had pardoned the felons, and the seneschal, Denis of Leiden, found the dwarf wandering in the forest abandoned. He brought him home, and the king had pity and pardoned even him. But his goodness did but feed the ire of the barons who swore this oath. If the king kept Tristan in the land, they would withdraw to their strongholds as for war, and they called the king to parley. Lord, said they, drive you Tristan forth. He loves the queen, as all who choose can see, but as for us, we will bear it no longer. And the king sighed, looking down in silence. King, they went on, we will not bear it, for we know now that this is known to you, and that yet you will not move. Parley you and take counsel. As for us, if you will not exile this man, your nephew, and drive him forth out of your land forever, we will withdraw within our bailiwicks, and take our neighbours also from your court, for we cannot endure his presence longer in this place. Such is your balance, king. Choose. My lords, said King Mark, once I hearkened to the evil words you spoke of my nephew Tristan, yet was I wrong in the end. But you are my lieges, and I would not lose the service of my men. Counsel me, therefore, I charge you, you that owe me counsel. You know me for a man neither proud nor overstepping. Lord, they said, call Frocian hither. You mistrust him for that orchard knight. Still was it not he that read in the stars the queen's coming there, and at the very pine tree too? He is very wise. Take counsel of him. And he came back, did that hunchback of hell. The felons greeted him, and he planned his evil. Sire, said he, let your nephew ride hard tomorrow at dawn with a brief drawn upon a parchment and well sealed with a seal. You bid him to ride to King Arthur at Cardwell. Sir, he sleeps with his peers in your chambers, does he not? Go you out when the first sleep falls on men, and if he loves Isolde so madly, as he does, why, then I swear by the laws of Rome he will try to speak with her before he rides. But if he do so unknown to you or to me, then slay me. As for the trap, let me lay it. But do you say nothing of his ride to him until the time for sleep. And when King Mark had agreed, this dwarf did a vile thing. He bought of a baker 4 farthings worth of flour, and he hid it in the turn of his coat. And that night, when the king had supped, and the men-at-arms lay down to sleep in the hall, Tristan came to the king as custom was, and the king said, fair nephew, do my will. Ride tomorrow night to King Arthur at Cardwell, and give him this brief, with my greeting that he may open and stay you with him but one day. When Tristan said, I will take it on the morrow, the king added, Aye, and before day dawn. But as the peers slept all round the king their lord that night, a mad thought took Tristan, that before he rode, he knew not for how long, before dawn he would say a last word to the queen, as it were. And there was a spear length in darkness between them. And now the dwarf slept also with the rest in the king's chamber, and when he thought that all slept, he rose and scattered a flower silently in the spear length that lay between Tristan and the queen. But Tristan watched and saw him, and said to himself, it's to mark my footsteps, but there shall be no marks to show. And so at midnight, when all was dark in the room, no candle nor any lamp glimmering, the king went out silently by the door, and with him the dwarf. And then Tristan rose in the darkness, and he judged the spear length, and leapt the space between for his farewell. But that day in the hunt a boar had wounded him in the leg, and in this effort the wound bled. Tristan did not feel it or see it in the darkness, but the blood dripped upon the couches and the flowers strewn between. And outside in the moonlight the dwarf read the heavens and knew what had been done, and he cried, Enter, my king! If you do not hold them, hang me high! Then the king and the dwarf and the 4 felons ran in with lights and noise, and though Tristan had regained his place, there was blood for witness. And though Isolde feigned sleep, and Pyramus too, who lay at Tristan's feet, yet there was the blood for witness. And the king looked in silence at the blood where it lay upon Isolde's bed, and upon Tristan's bed, and the boards, and trampled into the flower. And the 4 barons held Tristan down upon his bed, and mocked the queen also, promising her full justice. And they bared, and they showed the wound whence the blood had flowed. Then the king said, Tristan, now nothing longer holds. Tomorrow you shall die. And Tristan answered, Have mercy, Lord. But the felons called on the king to take vengeance, saying, Do justice, king, take vengeance. And Tristan went on, Have mercy, not on me, for why should I stand at dying? Truly, but for you, I would have sold my honor high to cowards who under your peace have put hands on my body. But in homage to you I have yielded, and you may do with me what you will. But Lord, remember the queen. And as he knelt at the king's feet, he still complained, Remember the queen, for if any man of your household makes so bold as to maintain the lie that I loved her unlawfully, I will stand up armed to see him in a ring. Sire, have mercy on her. Then the barons bound him with ropes, and the queen also. But had Tristan known that trial by combat was to be denied him, certainly he would not have suffered it. For Tristan trusted in God, and knew no man dare draw sword against him in the lists. And truly he did well to trust in God, for though the felons mocked him when he said he had loved loyally, yet I call you to witness, my lords and ladies, who hear this, and who know of the philtre and potion drunk upon the high seas, and who understand whether his love or disloyalty indeed. For men see this and that outward thing, but God alone sees the heart, and in the heart alone is crime, and the sole final judge is God. And therefore did he lay down the law that a man accused might uphold his cause by battle, and God himself fights for the innocent in such a combat. And therefore did Tristan claim justice and the right of battle, and therefore was he careful to fail in nothing of the homage he owed King Mark his lord. But had he known what was coming, he would have killed the felons. A couple more minutes, we'll wrap this one up really close. The Chantry Leap. Now dark was that night, and the news ran that Tristan and the queen were held, and the king would kill them both. And the wealthy burgess or common man, they wept and ran to the palace. And the murmurs and the cries ran through the city, but such was the king's anger in his castle above that not the strongest nor the proudest baron dared move him. Night ended and day drew near. Marke before dawn rode out to the place where he held pleas and judgment. He ordered a ditch to be dug in the earth, and knotty vine shoots and thorns laid therein. At the hour of prime, he had a band cried through his land to gather the men of Cornwall. They came with a great noise, and the king spoke them thus. My lords, I have made a faggot of thorns for Tristan and queen, for they have fallen. But they cried all with tears. A sentence, Lord, a sentence, an indictment for pleas, for killing without trial is shame and crime. But Marke answered in his anger, Neither respite, nor delay, nor pleas, nor sentence. By God that made the world, if any dare petition me, he shall burn first. And he ordered the fire to be lit and Tristan to be called. The flames rose, and all were silent before those flames, and the king waited. The servants ran to the room where the watch was kept on the two lovers, and they dragged Tristan out by his hands, though he wept for his honor. But as they dragged him off in such a shame, the queen still called to him, Friend, if I die that you may live, that will be great joy. Now hear how full of pity is God, and how he heard the lament and the prayers of the common folk that day. For as Tristan and his guards went down from the town to where the faggot burned, near the road upon a rock was a chantry, and it stood at a cliff's edge, steep and sheer, at the chapel, and it turned to the sea breeze, and the apes of it the windows were glazed. Then Tristan said to those with him, My lords, let me enter this little chantry to pray for a moment the mercy of God whom I have offended. My death is near. There's but one door to the place, my lords, and each of you has his sword drawn, so you may well see that when my prayer to God is done, I must come past you all again, and then when I have prayed God, my lords, for the last time. And one of the guards said, let him go in. And so they let him enter to pray. But Tristan, once in, dashed through and leapt to the altar rail, and the altar too, and forced a window of the apes, and he leapt again over the cliff's edge. And so might he die, but not that of a shameful death before the people. Now learn, my lords and ladies, how generous was God to him that day. The wind took Tristan's cloak, and he fell upon a smooth rock at the cliff's foot far below, which to this day the men of Cornwall call Tristan's Leap. His guards still waited for him at the chantry door, but vainly, for God was now his guard. And he ran, and the fine sand crunched under his feet, and from far off he saw the faggot burning in the smoke and the crackling flames, and fled. Sword girt and bridle loose, Cornwall had fled the city, lest the king burn him in his master's place, and he found Tristan on the shore. "Master Cornwall," said Tristan, "God has saved me, but, oh, master, to what end? For without Isolde I may not, and I will not live. I had rather died of my fall. They will burn her for me, and then I too will die for her." "Lord Tristan," said Cornwall, "take no counsel of anger. See here in this thicket with a ditch dug around about it. Let us hide therein where the track passes near, and the comers by it will tell us news. And boy, if they burn Isolde, I swear never to sleep under a roof again until she be avenged." Now there was a poor man of the common folk. I know it sounds like it's going to go on forever, but really they were like, I'm a page and a half away. Now there was a poor man of the common folk that had seen Tristan's fall, and had seen him stumble and rise after. And he crept a tentacle into Isolde where she was bound, and said, "Queen, weep no more. Your friend has fled safely." "Then I thank God," said Isolde, "and whether they bind or loose me, whether they kill or spare me, I care but little now." And though blood came at the cord knot, so tightly had the traitors bound her, yet still she said, smiling, "Did I weep for that when God has loosed my friend, I should be little worth." When the news came to the king that Tristan had leapt that leap and was lost, he paled with anger and bade his men bring forth Isolde. They dragged her from the room, and she came before the crowd, held by her delicate hands, from which blood drooped, and the crowd called, "Have pity on her, the loyal queen and honoured! Surely they that gave her up brought mourning on us all, our curses upon them." But the king's men dragged her to the thorn faggot as it blazed. She stood before that flame, and the crowd cried its anger and cursed the traitors and the king. None could see her without pity, unless he had a felon's heart, she was so tightly bound. The tears ran down Isolde's face, and fell upon her grey gown, where ran a little thread of gold, and the thread of gold was twined into her hair. Just then there had come up 100 lepers of the king's, deformed and broken, white, horribly, and limping on their crutches, and as they drew near the flame, and being evil, they loved the sight, and their chief Ivan, the ugliest of them all, cried to the king in a quavering voice, "O king, you would burn this woman in that flame. What a waste, what a waste! And it is sound justice, but too swift of justice. For very soon the fire will fall, her ashes will very soon be scattered by the high wind, and her agony be done. Ha! Throw her rather to your lepers, king, where she may drag out a life forever asking death. Throw her to me." And the king answered, Yes, let her live that life, for it is better justice and more terrible. I can love those that gave me such a thought." And the lepers answered, "Throw her among us, make her one of us. Never shall lady have known a worse end. Ha ha! And look at our rags and our abominations. She has had pleasure in rich stuffs and furs and jewels and walls of marble on her good wines and joy. But when she sees your lepers always king, and feels her hands upon them, and only them forever, their couches and their huts, then indeed she will know the wrong she has done, and bitterly desire ever that great flame of thorns." As the king heard them, he stood a long time without moving. Then he ran to the queen and seized her by the hand, and she cried, "Burn me! Rather burn me!" But the king gave her up, and Ivan took her, and the 100 lepers pressed around, and to hear her cries all the crowd rose in pity. But Ivan had an evil gladness, and as he went he dragged her out of the borough bounds with his hideous company. And now they took that road where Tristan lay in hiding with Cornwall, and Cornwall said to him, "Son, here is your friend where you do not." Then Tristan mounted the horse and spurted out of the bush and cried, "Ivan, you have been at the queen's side a moment, and too long at that. Now leave her if you would live." But Ivan threw his cloak away and shouted, "Your clubs, comrades, your staves, crutches in the air, for a fight is on! Ha!" And then it was fine to see the lepers throwing their capes aside, stirring their sick legs and brandishing their crutches, some threatening, groaning, all, but to strike them Tristan was too noble. There are singers who sing that Tristan killed Ivan, but it is a lie. Too much at night was he to kill such things as they. Gorvenal, indeed, snatching up an oak sapling, crashed it on Ivan's head till blood ran down to his misshapen feet. Then Tristan took the queen. Henceforth near him she felt no further evil. He cut the cords about her arms so straightly, and he left the plain, so that they plunged in the wood of Moroi. And there in the thick wood Tristan was as sure as in the castle keep. As the sun fell, they halted all three at the foot of a little hill. Fear had wearied the queen, and she leant her head upon his body and wept. But in the morning Gorvenal stole from a woodman his bow and 2 good arrows, and plumed and barbed, and gave them to Tristan the great archer, and he shot him a fawn and killed it. Then Gorvenal gathered dry twigs, struck flint, and lit a great fire to cook the venison, and Tristan cut in branches and made a hut and garnished it with leaves. And Isolde slept upon the thick leaves there. And so in the depths of the wild wood began for the lovers that savage life, which yet they loved very soon. Now, doesn't that sound like the end? Oh, no. That's a happy ending. We still have a whole nother Nights of Tales to tell you. That was the end of part 1. Parts of 2nd and 3rd will come next week, so I hope you can join us.